Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to Insomnia. I'm your host, Adrian Ladelia, and let's get right into it. I was just doing some light reading here. An old book on the history of Japan. Japan, as I'm sure many of you know, is an island nation in the Pacific Ocean, officially founded in 660 BCE when a legendary figure, Jimmu, the descendant of many deities, established himself as the first emperor of the country. The Japanese word for the country itself is Nihon, or Nippon, which translates from the kanji to origin of the sun, a fitting name indeed for a place with such a bright and colorful past spanning back through the ages. But today, we're focusing on the spiritual side of their story, and in particular, the wondrous and strange creatures and spirits which are said to dwell in the land of the rising sun, the yokai. According to the Japanese creation myth, documented in 8th century texts known as the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, there was a single deity who became very lonely, so they created several others to remedy this. The final two created, known as Izanami and Izanagi, were the most unique of them all, and the two would go on to create the islands of Japan. Izanagi had thrust a heavenly jeweled spear from the sky into the primordial sea that covered the earth, and from this churning of the waters, the Great Eight Islands would emerge. The gods descended onto the newly formed land and would unite in a marriage, creating all life thereafter. However, Izanami would die in childbirth, and she would enter Yomi no Kuni, or the land of the dead. Grief struck, Izanagi pursues her and enters the shadowy realm to save his wife, but it was all for naught, as she had been consumed by the darkness within, and Izanagi is forced to return to the world of the living, having barely escaped. Upon exiting the underworld, Izanagi purifies himself by bathing in the sea, and from this ritual, the land is covered in remnants of the underworld and heavenly divinity. Gods are formed, including the deities Amaterasu of the sun, Tsukiyomi of the moon, and Susanoo, creator of storms. But the magical energy had imbued the land itself with spirits of all sorts of mystery and uniqueness, and thus, the yokai were born. The yokai are a collection of all sorts of supernatural creatures said to inhabit Japan. Many people have heard the term yokai before, and its meaning is something rather unique because there aren't many terms similar to it throughout the Western world. The belief in these creatures reached ultimate popularity during the Edo period, from 1603 to 1868, a time of economic, artistic, and cultural growth for the country. The term was first mentioned, though, in ancient antiquity, in the 1st century to be exact, and is derived from the words yo, meaning attractive, bewitching, calamitous, and kai, meaning specter, apparition, wondrous, and mysterious. They can take on many forms. Some are good, some are evil, some are completely indifferent and benign. Some are animals, some are humanoid, some are simply inanimate objects come to life. Most importantly, many of the supernatural and mythological creatures of Japan fall under the category of yokai, with some very famous examples being onis, kappas, and tengus, the likes of which are often portrayed in popular media, and of course ghosts, or Yūrei, as they are called. In traditional Japanese beliefs, all humans have a spirit within them known as the Yūrei-kon. When a person dies, this spirit then enters a purgatory of sorts to await their proper burial rites, allowing them to be reunited with their ancestors in the afterlife. However, there are times when a person is killed in a sudden or violent manner, or the person harbors powerful emotions such as hatred, sorrow, anger, and jealousy. This spirit then becomes what is known as a Yūrei, and if powerful enough, can return to the world of the living to exact revenge, or to fulfill whatever purpose prevented it from reaching its final destination.
The traditional appearance of these spirits are often attributed to the famous Maruyama Okyo painting, The Ghost of Oyuki, from 1750. Ever since, the image of the Yūrei has always been depicted the same way. A white burial kimono, white being symbolic of purity, and long disheveled black hair, which comes from the woman's hair being let down upon burial. Their hands and feet are oftentimes lifelessly dangling, or not even visible at all, and another unique factor is that these spirits are typically female.
While Okyo's depiction is rather peaceful in its appearance, the vast majority of stories of these spirits are far from it. Like most types of yokai, there are different categories these spirits tend to fall into. More specifically, Yūrei can be sorted into 5 primary types.
Ubume, meaning birthing mother ghost, a mother who died during childbirth, depicted as blood-soaked, wandering and crying, oftentimes carrying a child in her arms. GORYO, meaning honorable soul, a vengeful ghost of the aristocracy, a noble person who is killed and capable of wrongdoing their rivals via catastrophic events. Funa Yūrei, meaning boat spirits, those who died at sea, oftentimes depicted as trying to drag others down to their fate, other times depicted as lights or ghost ships or umibosus as they are known. Zashiki Warashi, meaning guest room child, ghosts of children which are said to bring good fortune or leave a place in ruin depending on the variation.
Finally, the most popular and infamous, the Onryo, the vengeful spirit or wrathful spirit, back from the dead to seek revenge, extremely spiritually powerful entities, oftentimes immune to exorcisms or normal spiritual defenses. They usually need to be pacified by performing their burial rites or resolving their conflicts. Portrayed in popular media often, these are usually what comes to people's minds when they think Japanese ghosts. But where does this perception come from? Well, let's take a look at one of the most infamous stories of an Onryo, the Yotsuya Kaidan.
Long ago, there was a Ronin samurai named Iemon and his wife, Oiwa. And though Iemon was not a wealthy man, Oiwa loved him so and was happy. Though one day Iemon will be tempted by the riches and beauty of a noble woman, and so he planned to rid himself of his wife, poor Oiwa. He chose a deadly poison in the guise of a facial cream and gifted it to his unsuspecting wife. The poison did not kill her as planned, but she was terribly burned. When she recovered, Iemon took her to the cliffs overlooking the sea, for Oiwa had loved it there. The Ronin's frustration had turned to rage, and he threw his wife to her death. When night had fallen, Iemon was visited by a ghostly blue light. It was then he saw the image of his wife appear. Betrayal! She cried. The samurai drew his sword in fear and anger and beheaded the spectre. Stay dead, you pathetic soul, he cries. The next day he returns to the noble woman and asks for her hand in marriage. But as she turned to face Iemon, the face of his dead wife appears again. Betrayal! She cries. The samurai draws his sword again. I'll kill you as many times as needed, demon. But as he looks down at the body, he sees it was no demon or ghost. It was the noble woman. Iemon! His good friend shouts. What has happened? What have you done? Before the samurai can turn to face his friend, he feels a cold hand upon him. Betrayal! A voice cries. The samurai draws his sword and strikes. Demon! He shouts. But there was no demon, only his friend, whom Iemon had struck down. Panicked and in a fury, the samurai runs as far as he can. He eventually can run no further, and he finds himself at the cliffs his late wife had loved so very much. Before he could collect himself, he knew of the presence lurking right behind him. He knew it was the ghost of Oiwa. ends the story of Iemon and his wife, Oiwa.
This tale has been constantly retold since its beginning in 1825 as a kabuki theater performance, and it has become one of the most iconic of Japanese horror stories, being adapted in all forms of media time and time again. The image of the onryo and its vengeful nature has become the inspiration for several other ghost stories in the following years, and even some urban legends. Let's take a look at two of the more recent and infamous ones in particular.
The story of the slit-mouthed woman goes back to the 1970s and possibly as far back as the Edo period of Japan. The story is simple. A woman will approach you wearing a mask of some sort, and she'll ask you if she's pretty. Should you answer yes, she will remove her mask, revealing a horrifying smile. She will ask again, do you think she's pretty? Should you answer yes, she will brutally attack you for your lies. Should you answer no, well, the outcome is always the same. Your only hope is to run away. The story of HACHISHAKUSAMA is a very recent tale. A little girl was playing in a yard one day when she heard a strange noise. She turned to look and saw an extremely tall woman. This was the source of the noise. The woman stood taller than her garden's wall, which was easily 8 feet or more. She barely made it inside, and that night a purification ritual needed to be performed, or else the 8-foot-tall woman would find her again.
Terrifying tales for sure, and they stay true to most themes relating to Japanese ghosts. They want to hurt you. It is interesting how these tales are eerily reminiscent, though, of the European revenant, a specter or reanimated corpse that has returned from the dead to haunt the living. Some say they drink blood and consume human flesh. Others say these entities can literally cause plague and pestilence wherever they roam. It should also be noted that this brings up the constant debate of which is better, Eastern or Western horror. Either way, many people still believe there are yokai dwelling in the land of the rising sun, and this certainly will not be our last video discussing them. I'm your host, Adrian Ladelia, and this is Insomnia.